Yeah, A.J. Mahar here. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about the forever ammunition of people with borderline personality, and specifically untreated people with BPD. BPD untreated. What's forever ammunition? Well, it's really involved because it has to do with their past history, their adverse childhood experience, the repetition compulsions, what's in their unconscious, what they're not consciously aware of, their practiced adaptation to externalizing out stress or things of that nature, anything that's stressful to them, what was stressful in the past, and what they feel when they get triggered to dysregulate emotion in the here and now. So this is where they will, as quickly as they can, without even realizing what they're doing, they will externalize out to the person closest to them what they're feeling, because their only reference point, because there's no understanding of what they're feeling if they're untreated, when they're triggered to this um, dysregulated emotion or emotional state, there's no reference for them for what they're feeling, and so the already learned go to there is externalize, externalize, externalize. And so I think it's interesting that the forever ammunition really comes from the past and the early childhood of people diagnosed with BPD, and especially that remain untreated, in that the repetition compulsion cycles and driving what they're re-experiencing over and over again, yes, in some dissociative ways, with the dysregulated emotions, etc., that's where they right bite to protect themselves. That's where they come at you, they're externalizing and they come at you, but they're really talking to object other parent representation of the wounding parent, or perceived wounding parent, and they're really not seeing you or hearing you, and they don't have any idea, to be honest, really, about especially untreated, they don't have any idea why they're feeling what they're feeling. And there is already a mechanism that's been developed since early childhood to set things aside, but in adulthood that becomes more maladaptive, but it's still sort of an adaptive maladaption, if you will. And so when they get into these situations and the dysregulation, then and the need to externalize, then they're going to have forever ammunition, because they think it's what you just said, or what you didn't just say, or what you did, or what you just didn't do, or what you did yesterday or the day before, or whatever it is that they're playing out to some degree as if you're the wounding parent, and it could have all to do with a situation from the past, but they'll pick something in the here and now to externalize it out through, and that just happens probably in the intellect as a defense, a way of defending. And the forever ammunition of the borderline, and especially the untreated borderline, is just going to be endless accusations or questions, but mainly accusations. And it's going to be, why'd you do this? Why didn't you do that? Because it's being driven by impulsivity, fear of abandonment, the approach avoidance conflict, the fact that they can't bond, attach, the fact that they don't really love you, and that they can't take in your love. There's a lot going on, especially for untreated people with BPD. And what is this forever ammunition? Well, unless and until people get into significant treatment, get to healing and recover, to the healing recovery journey of actually getting all the way to being healing and recovered, then a lot changes. A lot changes for sure. And they need to find themselves, and they need to build an emotional container of self inside so that they don't need to externalize everything out. The forever ammunition of the borderline is the tumult and chaos of their adverse childhood experience in repetition compulsion cycles. And that means it comes out sometimes in ways that, whether knowingly or unknowingly, often unknowingly, so from the subconscious or unconscious mind, they are definitely seeking revenge. They're definitely out to get you, to corner you, to make you somehow accountable for what they're dealing with. And the forever ammunition is, so tied to what BP really is. So, like, when they fear that, and they can't trust because there's no self to trust, from which to trust. So often people with BPD are not only fearing abandonment, but they don't trust that you're being faithful to them. And even if you totally are being, and there's really nothing that anybody else would even worry about, they're going to be worried about it. And also, with the forever ammunition and the way things go, not that this is done consciously always, but sometimes, not always, but often, when people with BPD start accusing you, accusing you of cheating, it's maybe because they're monkey branching. It's maybe because they're doing something, because they're highly projective so much of the time. And the forever ammunition is the projecting out and externalizing and to a degree even projective identification with you as object other, and what they see or don't see mirrored back to them, what they're looking for and what they don't see. And they can't see in you, even if you're there for them in this whatever episode they're having with the forever ammunition, which might be, definitely they might be yelling, raging, screaming, or it could be the exact opposite, right? It could just ghost you and go no contact, or silent treatment and stonewall you kind of thing. But the forever ammunition is housed within the repetition compulsions. And I know I'm saying this a lot, and I'm saying it a lot for a reason, because it really is a way for people to understand and I believe make more sense out of what they need to know about BPD, so that people with codependency, and especially severe codependency, don't keep such focus on the X with BPD that they aren't moving forward. They aren't getting into, maybe they're in counseling, maybe they're with somebody who's not an expert in this area, maybe they're just not getting to the work because they can't stop the rumination, aren't doing anything to try to help themselves, because people with codependency have a real reticence to be able to focus on self. It's something people, depending on the severity of codependency, really need to learn. So the forever ammunition of the borderline is simply the adverse experience, the unresolved everything from childhood, and the inability to even consciously, in a lot of people's case with untreated BPD, to even understand what's happening to them, let alone what they're doing to you, which doesn't make it right, not justifying that, but they don't understand it. And then naturally you're gonna, if you're a partner or relative or whatever relationship type, you're gonna take it personally, and you're going to see more anger, and you're going to see distrust, and you're going to see accusations, and they are going to say it's all your fault, whatever they're feeling. And they will come up with examples that aren't just about what's driving this. They'll come up with examples or accusations that might not be true, but they'll aim it all at you. And the forever ammunition of the untreated borderline has nothing to do with you. But you will be the one in the direct line. And so it's really important to know that it has many manifestations and iterations of what the forever ammunition can look like, how they use it, when they're going to use it, are they using it consciously or subconsciously? And more often than consciously, it's subconsciously. But when you're the person who's getting hurt and you're the person on the other side of this, and it's all falling apart, and you're somebody with codependency who continues to, according to the programming of your childhood, continues to see all of this poor treatment as some inverted reason that makes no sense, to keep hoping, to try harder, to try more to rescue them, to try to get them to understand. That's where people with codependency need to, realize that once you're in that space and you're aware that this person has BPD, or you highly suspect it, and they're untreated, and you stay, then it's not just their responsibility anymore. They're still responsible for what they do, but now you're allowing it, and you might not know better, but somewhere inside you know better. So what are you going to do about that? People that stay too long get more hurt, lose themselves more, and it takes longer to recover. And then if people jump into the next relationship before they do their healing and recovery work, that rarely ever works out well. And in the long term, even if the new partner, if you jump in with another new partner after the BPDX really quickly and don't do your healing work, then even if they are healthy, it probably won't work because of your codependency. At some point, they'll have boundaries around, you know, all your needs and all what's going on for you. And people with codependency, especially mid-range to severe, they really need to come to a realization in their conscious awareness that the way that people with codependency relate, that relational style which is dysfunctional due to the dysfunctional relationship to and with self to begin with, that you are seeking to have your needs met by trying to rescue someone else and by, ignoring yourself. There's nothing healthy about that. So then the question becomes, is codependent love any kind of healthy love? And how does that overlap? I'm not saying it's the same, but with the fact that people with BPD can't love and don't attach. So the forever ammunition, and especially in those untreated with BPD, is going to be those cycles of blaming you and coming at you and treating you really horribly, to put it mildly, and beyond, and that's never justified. And they're just going to keep bouncing off you, at you and off you, with punishment and revenge, which is sometimes conscious and often not conscious, because, I guess for lack of a better way to put it, there's nothing else in their repertoire. And the repetition compulsions drive it all. And so it's like they can't come to choice points or responsibility unless they get treatment. And that's just the reality of it. And so that's why the ammunition, so to speak, is forever, seems forever, because it certainly will be. It'll outlast these relationships because if they don't get treatment, and then treatment takes 8 to 16 years to be totally successful. And it's not, with all that's going on with repetition compulsions, etc., I hope people by now, maybe if you watch my videos regularly, will come to understand just how minuscule to zero chance that you're at a zero-sum place of a double bind, no win. And these relationships, like I said, as they begin, they also begin to end. And there's no way to save them, salvage them, change them, fix them, or have them continue. And so the more that people with codependency keep on projecting out and externalizing out their own issues that they don't want to look at from their childhood, giving, because you are giving, hoping you'll get back what you need. And the wounded inner child under there is like, in an unconscious, not in your conscious mind, but they're looking for familiarity. They're looking for exactly something that this person with BPD is replicating for your inner child that happened with a parent. It doesn't have to mean that your parent had BPD. So the forever ammunition of BPD is about how much remains in their unconscious, subconscious minds when they don't seek treatment. The repetition compulsions it's just a hamster wheel. It's just going to keep going around, keep going around, keep going around. It's a drama triangle. The person with untreated BPD is just going to vacillate between the victim and the persecutor. And the codependent is going to vacillate between the rescuer and the victim. And what you have in these relationships that are unhealthy bonds and more is you have two victims. You have the person that was victimized in childhood and traumatized with BPD, and they become the persecutor to the codependent, and the codependent can become the persecutor to the person with BPD. And within all this chaos, and the codependent's often in the rescuer role to victim, you've got two people who are victims. This is a bottom line. The people out there say, oh, borderlines are just professional victims, or they're all just vulnerable narcissists, which, by the way, isn't a diagnosis, it's a construct of traits. So I'm going to have more to say about that as well. But the idea that they're professional victims is not true, because they are victims, and then they victimize. And then you get victimized, and then you might victimize back. Trauma bond. It's what it is. It has nothing whatsoever to do with love, and yet so many people with codependency can't realize that yet. Hear it, maybe get it up here, but it's stuck up here. And you keep hoping anyways, and you hope against hope. So the forever admonition of the borderline is the abuse that they perpetrate on others, but not in a predating way. It's not predation. It's not that organized. It's not the same as a narcissist, and all narcissists aren't the same, but it's not the same as when you see somebody diagnosed with NPD that has, like, a lot of traits, or up to malignant narcissism. So, more to the point, this forever ammunition is their wounded, victimized, traumatized lack of self. And so they're looking for self through you, they're looking for identity through you. That's why when you don't agree with them, or that's why when something goes awry, like you're 5 minutes late coming home from work, or you came out of the bathroom, they didn't expect you to come out that fast. It could be the simplest of things, right, that makes no sense. Why does it trigger them the way it does? Because this is the forever ammunition of the repetition compulsions embedded in unresolved trauma that's not in the conscious mind. And so to that end, I would say also, a lot more is not as conscious as people think it is, but I'm not saying there aren't some people with BPD doing various things that are abusive, and no excuse for that they might well know that they're doing. But they're all different, and not everybody with BPD is not like a one-size-fits-all. Because again, I just want to reiterate, it doesn't really matter about me, because I don't have it anymore, and whether you believe that or not, I don't care. Bottom line is, documented, etc. But I didn't have BPD severely at all. So, and I don't recognize what's going on with people with BPD today, untreated. I mean, yeah, I have 30 years worth of working with clients, and I understand this, but I don't recognize it as anything that I could have related to back when I was, 17 to just before I turned 30. So, or around those ages, like it's a long time ago. If I get the math a little wrong, excuse me, but so the main thing here is that people with BPD have the forever ammunition of their victimization, of their woundedness, of their trauma, and it's going to be like a hamster wheel cycle of repeating. And when they ghost, and if you hoover them, they hoover you, or you reverse hoover them, then everything just speeds up. The cycles, the devaluation, the splitting, because they're even more dependent. They come back and it's what they want, but they don't understand. It's a mess. It's a mess. And this is relational impossibility. And I don't say this to in any way demean people with borderline personality, because they certainly didn't ask for it, and they certainly didn't deserve what happened to them in their childhoods, except some of it's perceived in maybe 20% of, or somewhere between 13 to 20% of those with BPD, where the abandonment is perceived, but it's as real as if, what happens to the other 80 to 87%, who very much are victims. And so what happens is, see, people with codependency are victims as well, and you might just not have that in your conscious awareness yet. You've been hurt, you've been victimized in your childhood. So you have something going on there too, in repetition compulsion cycles within codependency and the false self in codependency. Not the same as BPD, but they overlap a lot. So it's important that people realize that forever ammunition of the borderline has the power that it does only because the codependents keep staying there and allowing it. Only because you keep taking on what they say you did. You keep trying to jump through all their hoops, perhaps not realizing yet that nothing can ever be good enough for them until they get into therapy and treatment and get the healing reparation that they're seeking in trauma bonds. And may I add that codependents are also seeking in trauma bonds. So if you don't take care of you as a codependent, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't get out of there, if you don't go no contact, if you don't get into therapy, if you jump into the next relationship, or you can't get over that person, I mean, nobody just gets over it, but if you're not working actively on doing that, then it's like the forever ammunition, even from the unconscious part of a person with BPD, is going to be stuck in your head, and it's going to multiply what was the trauma from your childhood. So I'm going to have another video coming soon on something, because you know what? You can't blame the borderline for everything. Too many people out there trying to do that. They have personal responsibility, for what they do and for any abuse, of course, whether they can take it or not. But then the last thing I would just like to say here for your consideration is, if you believe that BPD is a brain disease, or you believe it's in the hard wiring, whatever, and all these other things, and you think it's secondary psychopathy and all this other nonsense propagated by the pseudoscience APA with a hegemony big pharma, because they're trying to medicalize this, and it's not a medical issue. So, and even when trauma affects the brain, it's not a medical thing. It's not like a tumor on the brain. It's not. And the brain in therapy modalities through the neuroplasticity can heal and change itself. So, the point is that the forever ammunition of the borderline isn't so much what they have to aim at you and fire at you, as it is what you won't get out of the way of, and how you won't take personal responsibility for yourself as a codependent. Might sound harsh, but it's going to be a lot more of that coming, and a lot more, because I know what helps people and I know what doesn't help people. And you can't blame the borderline for everything. And the last thing I was going to say, so if you think it's secondary psychopathy, if you think their brain broke, if you think it's hardwired, etc., then why do you feel entitled that they should be held accountable? Because you can't have your cake and eat it too. So you have to think about how are you thinking about BPD and why? And more to the point, I would say to codependents again, I know you want to understand, but do you want to? So people with BPD right bite, it blocks their ability to get into treatment or get anywhere in recovery until they learn how to stop right biting and what that's about. People with codependency seem to just keep staying in this horrible, painful, self-abandoning denial that keeps you stuck where you are too. And you have your own repetition compulsion cycles repeating. So you're actually standing up to play the quote hero, to be the target. And nobody does that consciously in the beginning, but once you know what they're dealing with, and so you think, I know what I was going to say. You think, as they think that they, need somebody else for identity, and they don't know this. But what codependents think is, like, you have to keep focusing on the borderline because that's a codependent thing to do. And then after the relationship is over, ended, ruptured, they ghosted, they discarded you, whatever the case, which is horrible. It's all really painful. Shouldn't happen to anybody. Then you think by focusing on BPD and understanding BPD and becoming some kind of a quote expert in BPD, that that's going to set you free, when it's actually taking you in the opposite direction from the direction you need to go in. It is the inner child healing work, the self-differentiation, family of origin work, and many more other pieces in that process. That's your road to freedom. Not knowing more and more and more and more about BPD. But yet, this has become a repetition compulsion within codependency. And it's something that's evolving and worsening over time as BPD, and whatever that means, that trauma is evolving and worsening over time as we see things now that are being presented, and the APA pseudoscience of trying to medicalize BPD. It's just a gigantic relational impossibility and mess for all involved. So somehow I hope that helps somebody to think about something maybe a little differently than you have been. Take care.